On a quiet Wednesday morning, inside a small neighborhood cafe that most people passed without a second thought, an event unfolded that would later leave an entire franchise scrambling to understand how everything spiraled out of control in a matter of hours. It began, not with an argument or a dramatic confrontation, but with a woman, older, unassuming, quietly seated at a corner table, who appeared to be nothing more than another face blending seamlessly into the soft murmur of background conversations and the steady clatter of cups. Her presence didn't command attention. It didn't disrupt the room. It didn't raise suspicion of any kind. If anything, she seemed like the type of person most customers overlooked as they hurried through the cafe with their morning caffeine fixes. She sat alone, writing in a small, weathered notebook, her fingers moving with a calm deliberateness that suggested an unusual level of purpose. Yet nothing about her appearance hinted at the magnitude of the decision she would soon be forced to make, one with consequences reaching far beyond the confines of that modest coffee shop. What no one knew, not the baristas rushing through their opening tasks, not the customers distracted by their phones, and especially not the man who would soon try to humiliate her, was that this quiet, solitary woman had arrived on official business. She had come to observe, to evaluate, to document every detail with an eye trained to detect the smallest cracks in professionalism, the slightest deviations from policy, the subtle flaws that often signaled far deeper internal issues. But before any of that came to light, something else happened. Something that would set everything into motion. It started with a voice. A harsh, impatient voice that cut through the ambient noise of the cafe like a serrated edge. The manager, a man whose confidence far exceeded his courtesy, approached her table with a kind of forced authority that carried more insecurity than professionalism. Without lowering his tone, without considering how many people could hear him, he began to chastise her. He accused her of occupying space without contributing enough to justify her stay. He suggested she was causing inconvenience. He spoke to her as if her age, her quietness, and her solitude made her inherently less deserving of respect. Around them, customers paused, not because they understood what was happening, but because they sensed a confrontation brewing in the air. A few lifted their eyes with mild discomfort. Others looked away, pretending not to notice. And the woman herself? She didn't flinch. She didn't rush to defend herself. She didn't even close her notebook. She simply listened. There was something unsettling about the way she held her composure, as though she were watching a predictable scene unfold rather than finding herself the target of unnecessary aggression. It was the kind of reaction that should have been a warning, an indication that she was not the vulnerable or intimidated figure the manager believed her to be. But he didn't pick up on it. Not yet. Because arrogance has a way of clouding judgment, of convincing a person that they are in control even when the ground beneath them is moments away from collapsing. And in this case, the manager had no idea just how fragile his position truly was. What he perceived as defiance was something far more dangerous: documentation. What he assumed was passivity was meticulous observation. What he thought was a powerless woman at a table was, in reality, the one individual capable of determining the fate of his entire operation. Within 2 hours, the small cafe would be unrecognizable, its atmosphere replaced by panic, its employees whispering behind the counter, and its manager confronting consequences he never believed would reach him. And all of it could be traced back to this single moment of disrespect, a moment that would soon be dissected in meetings, replayed in recordings, and questioned by every upper-level supervisor in the district. But before we descend any further into the events that unraveled on that rainy morning, I want to know something from you, the viewer. Kindly tell us in the comments section where you're tuning in from today, or what time it is as you watch this. We love seeing our community from all over share a piece of their day before the story continues. The storm had not yet arrived, but the sky carried that heavy gray stillness that often comes before a downpour, the kind that seems to press gently against the earth as if reminding everyone below that something is about to shift. On that particular morning, Morning Brew Cafe opened its doors to the usual ebb and flow of early customers, individuals seeking warmth, caffeine, or a moment of comfort before returning to the routines of their day. No one suspected that the story they were stepping into would linger in the memory of the town for months afterward. Inside, the cafe felt calm, almost serene. The aroma of roasted beans drifted through the air, soft acoustic music played from hidden speakers, and the baristas moved with their usual practiced rhythm. But among the scattered patrons, one figure stood out, not because she demanded attention, but because she existed in quiet contrast to the world around her. Elaine Foster stepped through the cafe doors with the gentle confidence of someone who understood how to move through unfamiliar spaces without disturbing them. Her coat, neatly buttoned and dusted with faint specks of morning mist, suggested she had walked some distance rather than hurried in from a nearby parking lot. Her eyes scanned the room with a thoughtful, assessing gaze that many would interpret as simple curiosity, although it was far from that. Elaine was not there by accident. She had not chosen this cafe at random. And the small notebook she carried in her hand was more than a personal journal. It was a tool of her profession. Yet, to anyone watching, she appeared to be just another older woman seeking a quiet place to sit. A soft smile touched her lips as she approached an empty corner table near the window, choosing a spot that offered a clear view of both the counter and the dining area. She eased into her seat with deliberate calmness, opened her notebook, and began to write long, sweeping lines of text that moved with the ease of someone accustomed to documenting details others might miss. For several minutes, nothing unusual happened. The baristas called out drink orders. Customers chatted or typed away at their laptops. A couple shared pastries over quiet laughter. But she also documented Derek's conduct, his tone, his posture, the tension he radiated into the room. While she wrote, a young woman approached Elaine's table with a kind smile, one of the newer baristas, judging by how uncertainly she navigated the crowded space. "Ma'am," she said gently, "would you like a refill or anything else?" Elaine returned her smile warmly. "Not at the moment, dear. Thank you. If you need anything, I'll be right over there," the young woman added, motioning toward the counter. Elaine nodded and watched her leave, pleasantly surprised. There was kindness here. There was potential. But leadership was failing them. A failing leader can suffocate a thriving team. And Derek was about to make that painfully clear. 10 more minutes passed before it happened. The moment that would ignite everything that followed. Derek stepped out from behind the counter with the rigid purpose of a man convinced he was restoring order to his domain. His shoes clicked sharply against the floor as he marched toward Elaine's table, drawing the attention of nearby customers. Elaine paused her writing. She didn't look up. Not yet. "Excuse me," Derek said, planting his hands on the edge of her table as though claiming territory. "We need to talk." A few customers glanced their way. A soft murmur rippled through the cafe. Elaine lifted her gaze slowly, offering a polite, patient expression, one Derek mistook for weakness. "You've been here for quite a while now," he said, lowering his voice but not enough to hide the irritation simmering beneath. "And you're taking up seating other customers could be using. If you're not buying anything else, I'm going to have to ask you to free up the table." Elaine blinked once. "Is that your policy?" she asked, her tone steady, her words measured. Her question should have given him pause. But Derek did not pause. "It is when I say it is," he replied. Another line in Elaine's notebook was about to be written. But first, she closed it gently, placed her pen atop it, and folded her hands. "Very well," she said. "Let's discuss it." And just like that, with one simple sentence, the energy in the room shifted. Because while Derek believed he was confronting a powerless woman, he was actually stepping into an evaluation that could alter the future of his career. A truth he wouldn't discover until it was far too late. For a moment, the cafe stood suspended in a strange, unspoken stillness, a brief pocket of silence created not by the absence of noise, but by the weight of what everyone sensed was about to unfold. Conversations dimmed. Eyebrows lifted. Even the espresso machine, once sputtering with life, seemed to quiet as if the entire room had paused to witness the unlikely confrontation between a stern cafe manager and a composed older woman whose calmness felt almost disarming. Derek straightened his posture, interpreting Elaine's invitation to discuss it as a challenge rather than an opening for clarity. His jaw tightened. His shoulders squared. Everything about his stance suggested that he believed he was in control, that he had the final say, and that this conversation would end with him asserting dominance over a customer he believed had overstayed her welcome. But Elaine, she knew better. She had met men like Derek throughout her career, individuals who believed authority was proven through volume, posturing, and condescension rather than through competence, fairness, or understanding. People who didn't realize that the impatience they wore as armor only revealed their inexperience. People who folded under real pressure but disguised it behind anger directed at the easiest targets. In her experience, these individuals were the ones most prone to exposing their own weaknesses when placed under scrutiny. And Derek was walking straight toward that moment. "I don't make the rules," Derek said, though his tone suggested he believed he did. "But I enforce them, and right now, this table is needed for paying customers." Elaine tilted her head slightly. "I am a paying customer." "One coffee isn't enough," he retorted. "Is that written anywhere?" she asked calmly. A flicker of uncertainty, brief but noticeable, crossed Derek's face. He wasn't used to being questioned, especially not by someone he assumed would be intimidated by his tone. "It doesn't have to be written," he said. "It's common sense." Elaine tapped her notebook gently with one finger. "Common sense," she repeated thoughtfully, "is often a matter of perspective." Before Derek could respond, a soft voice interrupted. "Sir, she's not bothering anyone." It was the young barista from earlier, the one who had offered Elaine a refill with genuine kindness. Her voice trembled, but she stood her ground, glancing nervously between her manager and Elaine. Derek turned toward her sharply, eyes narrowing. "I didn't ask for your opinion." The young woman swallowed hard, her shoulders shrinking inward as she stepped back. Elaine watched the exchange closely. She wrote nothing, but she noted everything. Every detail, every tone, every expression. All of it was being silently recorded, if not in ink, then in memory. The cafe doors chimed with the arrival of a new customer, but no one shifted their attention. All eyes were fixed on the scene unfolding at the corner table. "You have 5 minutes to finish up and leave," Derek declared, his voice rising just enough for others to hear. "After that, I'll have to insist you vacate the space." A few customers exchanged uncomfortable glances. One woman shook her head in disbelief. A man whispered to his friend, "She's not hurting anyone." Derek noticed the shifting energy, the subtle murmurs of disapproval, and it only fueled his determination. He couldn't afford to lose control of the room. Not now. Not when he felt his authority slipping. Elaine sat still, her face composed, her eyes steady. There was no anger in her expression, only disappointment mixed with a quiet resilience that unnerved Derek more than any raised voice could have. "Is that truly how you want to handle this?" she asked softly. Her simple question carried the weight of something deeper, something Derek couldn't place but instinctively feared. It wasn't the content of the question that rattled him, it was the tone. Her voice held the calm certainty of someone who already knew the outcome, someone who wasn't intimidated by his position, someone who wasn't merely challenging him, but assessing him. Derek bristled. "Don't try to intimidate me. I don't care who you think you are." Elaine's eyes shifted, observing him with quiet curiosity, almost as though she were examining the gears of a machine working improperly. She took a slow breath, then closed her notebook with carefully measured grace, the soft sound echoing louder in Derek's mind than in the room itself. "I am not trying to intimidate you," she replied gently. "I am merely giving you an opportunity to reconsider your approach." Her calmness only aggravated him further. "I don't need to reconsider anything," Derek snapped. "You're leaving." He reached for her notebook. Several customers gasped. Elaine's hand moved faster than anyone expected, not forceful, not aggressive, but swift enough to halt his movement without escalating the situation. "I would advise against touching my personal belongings," she said, a mild warning, delivered with a poised firmness that caught Derek off guard. "What is that, some kind of threat?" he asked, stepping back. Elaine sighed softly. "No, just common sense." The same phrase thrown back at him, now laced with subtle irony. A few customers chuckled quietly, though not out of cruelty. They laughed because they recognized the imbalance, the mismatch between Derek's forced authority and Elaine's effortless composure. Derek's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. This wasn't going the way he expected. He needed control back. He needed the last word. "You know what?" he said, pointing toward the door. "I don't care who you are. You're done here. Either buy something more or get out." Elaine stood slowly, her posture straightening, dignity radiating from every measured movement. She didn't appear defeated. If anything, she looked, unexpectedly, like someone preparing to step onto a stage she had walked countless times before. She reached into her coat pocket. Derek's eyes followed the motion with irritation, assuming she was pulling out her wallet. But it wasn't a wallet. It was a badge. A small, official, metallic badge, clean, polished, unmistakable. Elaine placed it on the table between them, letting the light catch its engraved emblem. For a moment, no one breathed. Derek leaned forward, his expression shifting from annoyance, to confusion, to dawning dread. What is this?" he asked quietly. Elaine didn't blink. "You asked who I think I am," she said softly. "This is who I am." Her badge glinted under the cafe lights. District Quality and Operations Inspector, Morning Brew Corporate Division. The very position Derek had been warned about the week prior. The individual the entire district was expecting. The person corporate had emphasized must be treated with professionalism and respect. And she had been sitting in his store, unnoticed, documenting everything. "Now," Elaine continued, her voice steady but no longer gentle, "we can continue this conversation constructively, or you can proceed exactly as you have been. But understand that whichever path you choose will appear in my report." Derek's throat tightened. His mind raced. His posture collapsed into uncertainty. The room held its breath. Elaine picked up her badge, slid it back into her coat pocket, opened her notebook again, and, without looking at Derek, wrote a single, deliberate sentence. It was this moment, this quiet, devastating moment, that told everyone watching. The real storm had finally arrived. For several agonizing seconds after Elaine revealed her badge, silence clung to the cafe like humidity before a storm, heavy, suffocating, impossible to ignore. Derek's face drained of confidence as though someone had reached inside him and quietly removed the foundation of the identity he had been clinging to. The arrogance he once wore so easily seemed to dissolve into a fragile mixture of fear and disbelief. He stared at the badge as if hoping the engraving would blur, shift, or reveal itself to be a prank. But it didn't. It remained exactly what it was, the physical embodiment of authority he had just disrespected. Across the room, a low hum of whispers began unraveling among the customers, the kind of quiet murmuring usually reserved for witnessing a revelation they never expected to see. A few exchanged wide-eyed looks. Others observed Derek with varying degrees of judgment and schadenfreude. Even the young barista, still standing near the counter, covered her mouth with trembling hands, whether from shock, relief, or fear of her own job's proximity to Derek's missteps was unclear. Elaine didn't bask in the moment. She didn't gloat or smirk. She didn't weaponize the silence. She simply let Derek process what he'd done. The pen in her hand remained poised above the notebook, waiting. She knew the importance of this pause. Experience had taught her that silence often reveals more than shouting ever could. And in this silence, Derek's facade continued to crack. Finally, he spoke, but the confidence once filling his voice had thinned to a brittle whisper. "But I didn't know," he stammered. You could have said something earlier." Elaine lifted her gaze, the calm professionalism in her eyes cutting through his excuses with the precision of a scalpel. "And why?" she asked gently but firmly. "Would I need to announce my position in order to be treated with basic respect?" Her words carved through the tension, leaving Derek momentarily speechless. Customers nodded subtly, agreeing even if only to themselves. The question was simple, yet devastating. It stripped away the justifications Derek had leaned on his whole life, assumptions, biases, impatience, misdirected authority, and forced him to confront the truth of his behavior. Derek swallowed hard, shifting his weight from one foot to the other in a futile search for dignity. "Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot," he tried. "Maybe I was a bit harsh. But I've had a rough morning, and this place has been understaffed and—" Elaine raised a hand. Not rudely, not dismissively, simply enough to stop him from spiraling further into excuses that would only tighten the noose around his credibility. "Mr. Walsh," she said, "your circumstances do not justify your conduct. Leadership is tested most during moments of pressure, not ease." Her voice carried the layered weight of someone who had spent decades observing people exactly like him. Individuals who performed adequately when conditions were ideal but collapsed into unprofessionalism the moment they felt the slightest strain. A few customers murmured in agreement. The young barista's shoulders loosened with quiet vindication. Derek exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair. "Please, don't put this in the report. I can fix this. I can show you. Just let me try again." Elaine considered him for a moment, weighing sincerity against desperation. She knew better than to trust promises made in panic. Change rooted in fear rarely lasted. But she also knew the purpose of her role wasn't to destroy careers. It was to ensure that businesses upheld standards that treated employees and customers with dignity. And yet, some lessons required gravity to take hold. "I don't decide your future," she said. "Your actions do." Derek stared at her, the implications sinking in slowly, like ink bleeding through paper. His eyes darted toward the customers, who were blatantly watching now, pretending not to but failing miserably. Embarrassment clamped around his chest, squeezing the oxygen from his confidence. "Please," he whispered, "tell me what I'm supposed to do." Elaine didn't respond right away. She let the moment stretch, not to prolong his suffering, but to give him room to recognize the magnitude of what had already unfolded. Then, with deliberate calm, she closed her notebook. Just softly, yet the sound rang in Derek's ears like a gavel. "You can start," Elaine said, "by apologizing. Not to me, your report will address our interactions separately, but to your staff and to your customers. They witnessed your behavior. They experienced the atmosphere you created. And any apology you offer must be for them." Derek's mouth opened slightly as if preparing to resist, but the weight of the room pressed down on him. He glanced toward the young barista, the same one he'd snapped at moments earlier. Her eyes carried a mixture of surprise and fragile hope. He inhaled slowly, then nodded. Elaine didn't smile. She simply observed. Derek turned toward the barista. "Lila," he said, voice low, "I shouldn't have spoken to you the way I did earlier. I'm sorry." Her eyebrows lifted, stunned. She nodded but remained silent, unsure of how to respond under the watchful eyes of the entire cafe. Derek looked to the customers. "And to everyone else. I apologize. I was out of line." The apology hung in the air, awkward, incomplete, but real. Minutes ago, Derek had wielded authority as a weapon. Now, stripped of the illusion of control, he was forced to face the consequences of his own actions. For the first time, something resembling humility flickered through his posture. Elaine opened her notebook again and began writing. Derek watched each stroke of her pen with dread, imagining corporate meetings, disciplinary actions, potential termination. Panic swelled in his chest, panic that manifested as restless pacing, shallow breaths, and the occasional frantic glance toward the door. But Elaine wasn't focused on him anymore. She was watching the cafe, the staff, the customers, the flow of energy shifting now that the confrontation had softened. She saw how Lila stepped forward to help a waiting customer with renewed confidence. She saw how a mother with a stroller relaxed her shoulders. She saw how a man working on his laptop returned to typing, satisfied the tension had broken. This was the real assessment. Not the confrontation, but what happened after. The cafe had potential. The team had heart. The atmosphere, when not clouded by Derek's demeanor, was warm, inviting, full of possibility. But Derek himself? He was the fracture. Elaine took another note. A few minutes passed in an uncomfortable quiet before Derek approached her again, cautiously, like a man gently approaching the edge of a cliff. What happens now?" he asked. Elaine looked up, meeting his gaze with the kind of steady expression that forced honesty into the open. "Now," she said, "you continue running this cafe as if every customer could be an inspector. Because the truth is, they all are." Derek blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Elaine closed her notebook once more. Every person who walks through your doors, every customer, every employee, they are all evaluating you. They judge your atmosphere, your service, your kindness, your leadership. And their experiences decide the reputation of this cafe far more than I ever could. Derek swallowed, finally understanding the deeper truth. Elaine stood from her chair, adjusting her coat with composed grace. The cafe watched in collective silence as she stepped away from the table, moving toward the counter, not to leave, but to continue her inspection. Because the real evaluation was just beginning. Elaine moved toward the counter with deliberate, unhurried footsteps, each one echoing like a slow countdown in Derek's mind. He watched her with a dread that pulsed behind his ribs, a dread he couldn't shake no matter how deeply he inhaled or how many excuses he tried to assemble in the quiet corners of his mind. For the first time since he started working at Morning Brew, he felt like the walls of the cafe, walls he once believed he commanded, were tilting inward, narrowing around him with each passing moment. The customers sensed an emotional shift too, the kind that wraps itself around a room and refuses to let go. Conversations turned to whispers. Coffee spoons paused mid-stir. The young barista, Lila, stood frozen near the espresso machine, torn between fear for her job and relief that someone finally acknowledged what she had endured under Derek's leadership. Elaine reached the counter and inspected it closely, not simply for cleanliness, not merely for presentation, but for something deeper, the residual imprint of a manager's influence. A business reflects its leader the way a mirror reflects a face. And while the cafe itself had charm, warm lighting, inviting decor, a comforting scent of cinnamon and roasted beans, everything beneath that, the subtle tension woven through the staff's movements, told a different story entirely. She watched a barista nervously wipe down the sides of the machine. Watched another hurriedly reorganize the pastry display. Watched the unease ripple through them like an underwater current, visible only to those who knew where to look. Elaine knew exactly where to look. "Relax," she said softly to the staff, her voice carrying the weight of someone who genuinely cared and the authority of someone who could change their lives in a single stroke of her pen. "You're doing fine." Lila's shoulders dropped. The barista wiping down the counter stopped shaking. Relief spread among them like a quiet breeze. But Derek's relief did not come. Elaine turned toward him again, the notebook open in her hand, her expression unreadable yet steady in a way that forced him to brace himself. "Mr. Walsh," she began, "please join me." His stomach twisted. Every instinct in him screamed to flee, to hide, to deflect blame, but his legs carried him forward in helpless obedience. He came to stand across from her at the counter, the same place he had barked orders at his staff earlier that morning. Elaine gestured toward the cafe. "Tell me, truthfully, do you believe this is a healthy work environment?" Derek hesitated. For the first time all day, he couldn't rely on volume or authority. He had to rely on honesty. He swallowed. "Maybe not always." Elaine nodded once. "Why not?" He exhaled, deflated. "We're understaffed. Corporate cuts hours. Everyone's stressed. I guess I take it out on people sometimes." Customers exchanged looks. Some sympathetic. Some skeptical. Elaine tilted her head. "Do you know what stress reveals about a person, Mr. Walsh?" Derek shook his head. "It reveals who they truly are," she said softly. "Pressure does not create character. It exposes it." Her words hit him like a cold wave, slow, invasive, impossible to escape. "And today," she continued, "you showed me, and everyone in this cafe, your true approach to leadership." Derek's eyes lowered. Elaine took a slow breath, then flipped to a fresh page in her notebook. Derek watched her pen hover, terrified of what she would write next. But before she inked the page, she spoke again, this time addressing the staff. "How long," she asked gently, "has this been happening?" Lila froze. A male barista shifted nervously. Another girl bit her lip. Finally, Lila stepped forward. "He's always like this," she said, voice trembling but earnest. "He yells a lot. Not always at customers. Mostly at us. Especially when things get busy." Derek's eyes widened. Lila, don't. Elaine held up her hand to silence him. Is this true? She asked the others. Slowly, reluctantly, one by one, they nodded. A wave of realization washed over the customers as well, because it wasn't just about one incident anymore. It was a pattern, a deep-rooted, unchecked behavior. Elaine wrote several long lines in her notebook, each stroke of her pen sharper than the last. Derek could almost hear the consequences forming behind her hand, lines that would travel to corporate desks, supervisors, executives. He felt his career slipping from his grasp. But what neither Derek nor the watching crowd expected was what happened next. Because Elaine closed the notebook, not with the cold finality of someone delivering punishment, but with the careful deliberation of someone preparing to offer an unexpected mercy. She turned to Derek, her eyes softening, but only the slightest amount. "Mr. Walsh," she said, "I need you to understand something fundamental. A cafe can survive imperfect coffee. It can survive a messy counter. It can survive long lines. But it cannot survive a leader who damages the very people keeping it alive." The room hummed with an emotional electricity. Derek blinked, barely holding back the sting in his eyes. "I am recommending a mandatory suspension," Elaine continued. "You will attend leadership training, workplace behavior evaluation, and conflict resolution courses. Your regional manager will determine the length of the suspension." Gasps erupted in the cafe. Someone whispered, "Wow," even Lila's jaw dropped. But Elaine wasn't finished. "And if you complete all required training," she added, "you may return under probation. It will be your choice whether to rise to the expectations of your role or resign from it." Derek stared at her, stunned. "You're giving me a chance?" he asked, voice raw. Elaine looked at him steadily. Justice should teach, not only punish. When people are given an opportunity to change, the outcome reveals everything about who they are. And then, just as Derek seemed to release a breath of gratitude, Elaine added the strike he never saw coming. "But Mr. Walsh, if even one more incident occurs, one moment of disrespect, one misuse of authority, one report from your staff or customers, your employment with this company will be terminated immediately." Derek's breath caught. The entire cafe froze. It wasn't cruelty. It was consequence. A line drawn clearly and irrevocably. Elaine turned to Lila and the staff. "You deserve a workplace where leadership supports you, not breaks you. I'll be reporting on your teamwork as well, and I'll be recommending additional staffing and resources." Relief spread through them like a sunrise, warm, staggering, hopeful. Elaine gathered her notebook, placed a tip on the counter 3 times the cost of her coffee, and stepped toward the door. The customers stepped aside instinctively, creating a respectful path. But just before she pushed open the door, she turned back one last time. Her eyes scanned the cafe, its people, its energy, its fragile new beginning. Then she spoke a final line that landed with the weight of a moral reckoning. "Remember, leadership isn't measured when everything goes right. It's measured when everything is falling apart." The door opened. A gust of cool air swept in, and Elaine walked out into the gray morning, leaving behind a cafe forever changed. But the real surprise came later that evening, a twist no one, not even Elaine, saw coming. Corporate contacted her. Not to question her report, not to challenge her judgment, but to inform her that the franchise owner had been secretly monitoring Derek for months, and Elaine's findings had confirmed suspicions far more serious than what happened that morning. An internal investigation was being launched, not only into Derek's behavior, but into the regional management that allowed it. The cafe, the staff, and even Derek had unknowingly become the spark for a wildfire of accountability. A wildfire that began with a single act of disrespect. Sometimes, justice looks like punishment. Sometimes, justice looks like mercy. And sometimes, justice reveals truths we never expected to find. But the question is, was justice truly served here? Or did this story only uncover the beginning of something deeper? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Would you have spotted the red flags sooner? And if you thought this story was surprising, wait until you hear what happened in the next case. A story even corporate tried to silence. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss what comes next.